The Dallas Mavericks were reportedly in talks with the Cleveland Cavaliers to discuss a sign and trade that would send Collin Sexton over to be with Luka the Don. Now, what does this mean? We got to look at that word reportedly specifically, I think. It's a word that is so constantly thrown around in whether it be the ball sack sports of the world or the Wojs. It's a word that it's kind of like that saying, yeah, no, for sure. It can mean yes, it could be no. We're not really entirely sure. So I think with that, you always got to take that with a grain of salt in that whether it's people trying to drum up the market that's kind of been screwed by this whole Kevin Durant debacle or whatever it may be, you just don't really know. But for the sake of argument, let's pretend this is true, and the Dallas Mavericks are looking to add. I would say he'd be your second scorer. Looking at the roster you have now, Christian Wood is a really good addition. You already have, you got Tim Hardaway Jr. coming back, as well as, a bunch of those guys that really stepped up. Spencer Dinwiddie, like slotting back into that 6-man role, if this is the truth. And the Dallas Mavericks would shape up to be really good in this trade. But before we get to that, let's talk about some of the other perspectives we got here. Now, first of all, let's talk about the Cavs. If I'm the Cavs, I already have the qualifying offer extended to Collin Sexton, so it's kind of, you wait to see what comes out, and then from there you go with your decision. Now, from what I've heard and what I've read, aka 5 minutes before this, making this little like spiel, it's a whole lot of nonsense in that nobody's really willing to fork over either the assets or a contract that could potentially sway the Cavaliers away from matching it, because prior to this report coming out, which is today, well, it's like midnight where I'm recording this, so technically yesterday, whatever, the Cleveland Cavaliers offered Collin Sexton, I believe it was 3 years, $40 million. Now, to obviously anybody on earth that's not inside the NBA, that's life-changing money. But to a guy like Collin Sexton, a man who's averaged 24 points per game, a man who took down the greatest offense ever assembled in basketball, when you're talking about the Nets' big three, bit of a low ball. Listing off those accolades. 24 points per game, back-to-back 20-point game seasons, and all of that has been messed up just by the fact that last year, 11 games, I think it was about 16 points per game, it ended up going down with a meniscus tear, which you never want to see, but c'est la vie. And the way I'm seeing it now, he's probably going to play it out. But when you look at the Cavaliers like guard rotation, Darius Garland, obviously first-time All-Star, Ricky Rubio, who was looking like a premier backup before he got injured, Howell Neto, obviously Collin Sexton's not playing behind him, but when you look at that, like point guard room specifically, especially in the small department, it's a very complicated situation to say the least. Not to mention you got guys like Karis LeVert, who in my opinion, when you look at it, is going to slot into either your two, if you plan to do the big three in the sense of 3 7-footers again, as well as Isaac Okoro still having to get his minutes in. So I think as much as Collin Sexton wants to kind of bet on himself, Fred VanVleet style, really showcase that he's worth more than 3 years, $40 million. I don't know if Cleveland's really the place to do it. It's a nice safety blanket just because, that's guaranteed money with the qualifying offer, but I really hope these reports aren't completely smoke and that there's some validity to it. And I'm granted, I do think there is, but the underside, nope, that is definitely not the word. It's coming to me. The downside to that is that all these talks have kind of been in a stalemate in that they're not really getting back any of the assets that they think that Collin Sexton is worth and that I believe he's worth. But with the NBA being a very what have you done for me lately league, we don't really look at the bulk of a player's career, more so, season by season for the most part. It's not looking hot in terms of like what you can get for an asset like Collin Sexton. Now, if I'm the Mavericks, and as well as if I'm the Cavs, things that I'd look for is obviously, wing depth as well as 3-point shooting, because the Cavaliers ranked, bottom half of the league, not like super bottom, but, right below average to, bottom, it's potato. Think of a guy like Davis Bertans, obviously one of the worst contracts in the league right now, but he did have that one game where he shot like for 4 for 4, and then that's all he did. But bringing it back to Davis Bertans before this contract and overall throughout his career has been known to be one of the sharpshooters in the league. And There's something about this league that we're watching right now, as I'm playing, because obviously I don't play, but the three ball is something that a lot of teams are willing to live and die by. And when you look at the Cavaliers, it's definitely something that I don't think they're necessarily going to die by, but something that they're going to live with just based on the fact that, Darius Garland has ability to shoot. Ochai Agbaji coming into this league, shot 40% from college. Jared Allen, he proved he could shoot in the All-Star game, but obviously he's not going to be taking those. And Evan Mobley, he's looking about in the pro-ams that I've watched, not that I've watched, the highlights and stuff. He's stretching out, which is really nice to see. He did that a little bit in this first season, and we'll see what happens in this sophomore season. But yeah, I think you throw a guy like Davis Bertans into that, gives you the ability to not necessarily switch or anything like that, but gives you a nice kick out and shoot. He's a supreme catch and shooter, and not saying that's worth Collin Sexton, but if I'm the team like the Cavs and I'm really looking to contend, it's not so much about getting like a star to pair alongside your stars, because you already have your big three cemented in a way. I think, Darius Garland, you just paid him. Jared Allen, he got his extension, and Evan Mobley's looking like the next Tim Duncan in a sense. I'm not saying he's going to do that because, every player is different or whatnot, but I don't think you necessarily need a player of Collin Sexton's presumed stature compared to what you should really get back. And I think that's just rotational pieces, guys that you can slot in and they're going to do their work where they have to work and go about your day. Looking at this other side, though, the Jazz are another team that have been involved in the conversation as well. And although I don't really have much to say about it, I really hope this is all complete bull, because we've seen the peak of what a two very small guard backcourt has been. And, I'm talking about Dame and CJ. It's you make it to the conference finals, but you get your ass beat when it comes to just the fact that teams are a lot bigger, especially nowadays. I mean, obviously, if he goes to the Mavericks, they're going to be in the West. But if you just look at, if you had a backcourt of two guys who are like 6'1", like say he goes to the Mavs, or not the Mavs, the Knicks, for example. Jalen Brunson, Collin Sexton. On paper, it seems nice, two guys that are straight buckets. But put them up against the Raptors, Project 6A, and long day to say the least. And when you look at the Jazz, it'd be a lot of the same, unless, the Donovan Mitchell trade goes through and all that stuff, and then that's all fine and dandy. It's going to be a lot of like all the other seasons Collin Sexton has had where, you put the ball in his hands, let him be the primary ball handler, and team success kind of goes out the window. But bringing this back to the Mavs, I think when you look at the roster right now and you insert him into it, looks pretty nice to say the least. Obviously, Luka Doncic is a player that's generational, has so much gravity geared towards him, and slot Collin Sexton alongside that, a guy who hasn't had that in his career and might be able to do some nice stuff. In addition to that, when you look at the guard rotation there, Spencer Dinwiddie, you'd be able to have him be in the six-man role, which is a role he's played throughout his career and a role he's very well accustomed to. And then Dorian Finney-Smith, who's in my opinion, the most valuable player when it comes to like just general contract worth and, what they really provide to their team. He's a guy that would probably be getting paid, could definitely be paid a lot more, but whether it's loyalty or just, securing the bag, is what it is with that. And then the other player that I want to talk about, Christian Wood. When you just look at those two guys, pairing them alongside Luka Doncic, seems like a lot of offense, but also a little, might slip a little bit on the defensive end. But that's why you got guys like Reggie Bullock. That's why you got guys, Dwight Powell don't really defend, but y'all know what I mean. There's a lot of scoring coming from those three, and you pair that alongside some solid defenders. It's looking pretty nice to say the least. So let's kind of wrap it up like this. What do I think is going to happen, and what do I want to happen? So what I think is going to happen is that the Kevin Durant situation and just general, all these kind of rumors that have put a damper on the market, whether it be the fact that guys aren't getting signed or, everybody in general, I think is just a little gun shy and that they don't want to be the guy to miss out on this kind of thing. With that being obviously Kevin Durant, not that the Cavaliers are in like contention for that, because they're not. But when you look at the landscape of the NBA, I think there aren't any moves that are going to happen until that either gets resolved and Kevin Durant finally getting traded, or them kind of settling aside their quarrels or whatever it may be, and you go from there. you ride out with that team because on paper, the Nets I still think are probably going to be one of the best teams in the league if everybody's healthy and all that. But that's boring. That's what the sensible person would say. We're here to talk about what I want because it's my channel. But no, I want Collin Sexton on the Mavericks. I think he plays a similar role. Him and Jalen Brunson have similar numbers when it comes to not necessarily the eye test, but when you just look at their stat lines. Both average right around 20 and both average around 4 assists a night. So they're not going to be your lead playmakers or anything, but they have the ability to do that at we'll call it a sensible level. But I think what Collin Sexton provides is the upside of being a pure, straight bucket. Not that Jalen Brunson isn't that, but I just feel that when you look at the two careers so far, Collin Sexton has been shown a more, I don't want to use the word consistent because it's still not translating to team success in a sense, but fuck it, we'll use it. He's shown the ability to be a more consistent bucket in that, the 24 points per game, back-to-back 20-point seasons, and Jalen Brunson hasn't necessarily hit that. And when you pair that alongside Luka Doncic, who one is going to be your lead playmaker, and two is a player that, when I think about it, there were maybe only 3 or 4 players that can do that, in that they generate so much gravity that a team's defense, that's the opposing defense, is really going to have to live and die with either you let them cook one of your guys one-on-one, or you send a double, triple. We've seen whole starting fives being thrown at Steph Curry before, and you let those guys defend and you kind of let the other guys beat you. Adding Collin Sexton to the mix of that for the Mavericks alongside a guy like Christian Wood, whose ability to be a straight bucket as well. And I'll say it like this. You're not going to send as many double teams as you'd want to. And so with that, again, the word reportedly is the word that's kind of neither here nor there. It means everything. It means nothing. So this could all be for nothing. Collin Sexton's most likely going to spend the year on the Cavs, but for the sake of the NBA landscape having more plurality, I really hope he does sign with the Mavericks, or at least get traded there. Whatever. Regardless, deuces.